Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I happened to glance over at the live chat and it said that something was wrong with the stream, so that I had to restart it. Sorry for the inconvenience. I don't know how much of this got through, but I explained that the Lego franchise started out with a carpenter by the name of Christiansen. They got into plastics in the 1950s, and from there, the Lego bricks were born. But skipping ahead, we see that in 2020, an entire franchise has been born. I think Lego is the number one toy in the world, and all of the toy makers look at it enviously, drooling for the amount of sway it holds in the toy market. Now, I'm going to argue that the Lego phenomenon goes far beyond just the toy industry. I'll go far as to say it's an ontology, it's a heuristics, it's a way of even experiencing the world. It's been looked to, it's been kind of, I call it cannibalization. It's been, and the Lego people don't mind it, by the way. They found out that the more open source it is, the better it is for them so far as revenues are concerned. But the Lego franchise has been adopted by anybody, people from counseling, psychologists, therapists, physicists, mathematicians, people who are involved in automation, robotics, decision theory, you name it. In fact, one of the first steps I took was to go into the academic literature and find out how many articles there were on Lego, and there were dozens and dozens and dozens of them. I'll post some of them on my Patreon if you want to take a look at them. They're fairly specialized and arcane, but you'll get an idea how seriously professionals in these respective fields take the Lego phenomenon. It's far more than the toy that we're familiar with. So I started out with the acronym, the AFAL. It stands for Adult Fan of Lego, and this is what I find difficult to believe, because I think the Lego people were given an offer they couldn't refuse when they were a struggling company. But the head of Lego, the title is Community Engagement. He claims the whole Lego fandom was unplanned. He claims that the upper level management were shocked at the degree to which people all over the world, different nationalities, different language groups, races, and it tended to be skewed towards men, but now they're moving more towards a 50-50 balance of male and female, and perhaps transgender, although that wasn't part of the documentary. But the head of community engagement says that the Lego people were astounded that there were all these different fan organizations that seemingly had grown up organically. And if that sounds familiar, you're right, because today that phenomenon is called crowdsourcing. So they meaning the Lego people, managed to figure out that they could crowdsource the creativity and supplement their paid creative staff that are in the headquarters in Denmark, and they have them throughout the world, by the way. And this is also part of the Lego model. It's the distribution of intellectual power, creative power all over the world, so that the so-called developed countries aren't going to have a monopoly on it. So for you engineers and all the people who have the advanced degrees, you're going to be competing with people around the world from low salary, low wage areas. And that's part of the Lego economy, the new Lego economy. It's all a test. All this is a giant political, economic, social science, anthropological test, just like Bitcoin, right? All you Bitcoiners out there, you've been beta testing that whole monetary system for the central banks who will snatch it away when the appropriate time comes. So of course, this person who's involved with community engagement, they can't but help reveal what they're really up to. And at point 30, in the 30-minute point of the documentary, he utters, or one of the people at Lego utter a very telling, a very revealing phrase. and he calls it systematic creativity. Systematic creativity. It's a bounded system, it's finite, and it allows for all manner of creativity. You can build anything from a small home, a small little structure. You can build a life-size fighter bomber, which is one of the major projects, or you can construct entire film sets from the Legos. Nonetheless, it's bounded. There are limitations here. What they're dependent upon is you bringing the storyline, you bringing the narrative to the play flow that you're involved with. Now, I'm thinking ahead and anticipating the point where your systematic creativity gets shunted over into what could be called curated creativity. That means enforced creativity. You're going to be locked in to a certain form of gameplay. They've given you the first experience with the crack cocaine, and once you're hooked on it, then comes the repressive part of it. It's a binary weapon, ladies and gentlemen. They're giving you the feel-good part right now, and once they have brought you into their world, their universe, that's when the clamps come down. I alluded to the fact that Lego was struggling as a business enterprise. They almost had to go out of business in 2003. Now, they don't say this in the documentary, but my guess is that some central bankers approached them with an offer they could not refuse and said, Mr. Christiansen, I think it's a publicly held company, but I think the family is still involved with management decisions to a certain degree. But they went to the upper level management of Lego and they gave them the proverbial offer they could not refuse. And they said, if you allow us to use your toy as a tool, as a weapon in constructing the New World Order, the Great Reset, as Klaus Schwab has famously uttered, then we will rescue you. And this is a common strategy, by the way. The bankers like to run you into debt, into penury or even poverty, so that you'll do practically anything in order to see the world or see the deal along the lines that they envision. So they were going out of business in 2003, and just around that time, and this is why I'm drawing this inference that the bankers and the New World Order handlers and managers got involved here. But around that time, MIT, and MIT does not stand for Made in Taiwan. It stands for the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which, as you know, is a tech arm of another alphabet agency, the CIA. And you know any of the number of scientists and thinkers and intellectuals and pseudo-intellectuals like Joichi Ito, who was the head of the Media Lab, until they got him out by setting him up with some sort of humiliating pictures or photos. So Joey Ito's gone. But that's the famed MIT Media Lab, Negroponte, of the famous Greek-American shipping family. And shipping is very important in this New World Order intelligence, military, civilian corporate network here. That's this MIT Media Lab. But it was Lego and MIT drew up a memorandum of understanding. They developed a collaborative working relationship, and they came up with a product called Mindstorms, like brainstorm, right? And you could read it another way. You can say that these people, MIT, and they're big in neuroscience, by the way. There's a whole neuroscience, brain hacking, mind hacking, neuroscience connection here that I might not have time to get into it in this short presentation. But there's another reading of Mindstorms that's to create confusion and cognitive dissonance in your everyday life. In lieu of political participation, in lieu of full investment in your society and community, you have this alternate Lego playverse that is being set up for you here, courtesy of not just MIT, but any number of elite universities, research institutions. So that's Lego. Lego took a serious turn toward the New World Order in 2003. That's when it ceased being a child's toy and became serious business for the New World Order, the Great Resetters. Specifically, it was MIT that brought to Lego this proposal saying, hey, listen, you can be very helpful in helping us to introduce to the largest society robotics. So they rescued the company with a product where interactive, that's their phrase, interactive robots were featured, because most of us have grown up with an innate or at least a conditioned fear of robots, going back to the science fiction of the 1920s and 30s, Hugo Gernsback era, H.G. Wells, all those people in the 1950s, B movies up to the present, 2001, right? So we have most of us have a dystopic prejudice against robots and robotics. In fact, you don't hear any of these robot or robotic scientists call them robots anymore. If they do, they call them social robots, right? Because they want to make them warm, fuzzy, approachable, and playable. So that's part of the re-socialization of new generations of human beings all over the world that needs to take place. And we found that it only takes a generation. In the case of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, we saw that it only takes about 20 years to take an entire generation and reprogram them into an antisocial black shirt type of fascist organization. So 20 years is about right. And I've read some literature, for example, that's out by anthropologists talking about how the Chinese Communist Party created cadres. They sent them out to the country. They had all kinds of activities for them. It became play. It became like a little society of their own in a nutshell. I can get back to that later. But in other words, there's an entire re-socialization process that's embedded in these little Lego bricks that most people are oblivious to. I hope I get a lot of hate from the adult fans of Lego, and feel free to leave some comments below, and please subscribe and tell the other haters out there to check out this video, because this is going to open the floodgates to really discuss what Lego means in terms of this techno-fascist order that is in the offing that we're seeing right now. Most of us are in lockdown, playing with our Legos. I guess this was a few years later, after the think tank, the MIT types, University of Tokyo people started collaborating with the Lego upper level management. There's a Japanese thinker by the name of Nishiyama Kohei, and he's described in the documentary as being an expert in crowd creations. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, crowds can be created just like weather can be modified, and the atmosphere, anything can be engineered, including your Lego universe. So this guy Nishiyama came up with a whole line, a Lego line. It's called Lego Minecraft Kusou, and supposedly in Japanese it means wish. It sounds strangely like kusai, which means stink, and uso, which means lie. And I think this Nishiyama guy is playing linguistic games with us, and they love to do that. These globalists love to use these little cryptic twilight veiled language in messing with us, because it does really get down to storytelling, narrative, word magic. There's this other phenomenon within the Lego playverse called the brick film, as in Lego brick. And this is nothing but stop motion. You might remember, for those of you who are old enough, remember the California Raisins, heard it through the grapevine, right? This is claymation. There was I forgot the name of the director, but he sort of popularized it. And before that, in the 1950s, I grew up with this. There was a animator by the name of Art Clokey who came up with a character called Gumby. That was a very, very spacey, surrealistic piece of animation. Gumby was cool. But anyway, that was stop motion. That's what Art Clokey called clay motion. So it's not a new idea. The difference is that instead of using clay as the medium, these Lego bricks are used. And they feature a couple of different budding directors, and they all have a common characteristic. And I don't want to put them down, but let's say that there are people that don't really like to look at you in the eye. They're shoegazers typically. They're very introverted. They have difficulty communicating and talking and dealing in society. And some people call them the indigo children, but there seems to be a connection of their rise in population with mass vaccinations back in the 70s and 80s. And the reason I mentioned this fact, this demographic fact in passing, is because indeed, amongst the dozens of academic articles that I found, there was a lot of articles about using Legos for the treatment in people who are on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. The therapists have found some very good results with young people, children, and young adults in dealing with Legos. And jumping ahead a bit in my own research, I've been playing with this hypothesis. Have you heard of Stockholm syndrome, right? You've heard of social Stockholm syndrome that we're going through now, where people are so oppressed and so locked down, right, that they fall in love with their oppressor. Literally, this happened in Stockholm, Sweden. So I've come up with a similar concept, and I call it social autism. And that is the autistic phenomenon is no longer simply specific to a certain group of children that have been treated. I'm not going to say vaccines, all right? For some reason, there are many hypotheses about that, but for some reason or another, there's a large cohort of children, Japan specifically. Nishiyama is no doubt familiar with the phenomenon of fairly significant, it's a small percentage, but it's a significant percentage of young Japanese males who are called hikikomori. And these are people who stay in their parents' home and cannot deal with the outside world. And again, there is a correlation between large mass vaccination regimes in Japan with the rise of the hikikomori population. So it's only appropriate that Nishiyama, who is an expert in crowd creation, be involved with the Lego resocialization of the human race. And as expected, Lego has to be made cool amongst the artists and intellectuals, the people who wear black, right, and who read complex poetry and prefer foreign films. There's a guy by the name in the documentary, Nathan Sawaya, who calls himself a Lego artist, and you guessed it, he claims to spend six figures each year buying a Lego bricks as for his assemblages, which I assume he sells in the galleries, in the fine art galleries. Good luck to you, Mr. Nathan Sawaya. If I forgot the name of the artist, he's a multimillionaire, but if you can sell sculpture with featuring Michael Jackson and his little pet monkey to people who need art objects in order to launder money, then more power to you. But anyway, he calls himself a Lego artist. So what are some of the ideas that, or some of the hypotheses, because none of this has been, at least from my standpoint, been definitively verified. One is what I call identity construction or identity engineering. It is creating an identity that goes beyond nationality. They're trying to figure out how to erase the gender identity gap between male and female, just like through the whole GLBTQ movement. We've seen comic books and sports and any number of the military, any number of institutions. These social engineers have gone there and tried to consciously erase the gender distinctions, because in their version of the Lego verse of the future, It's modular, it's componential, it's non-reproductive, it's as sterile as plastic, it's as sterile as ABS. There's no room for male, there's no room for female. So in a nutshell, to put it very briefly, we're going through this process of identity construction, right? Now, we could use that positively. I'll leave that for the end of this short little talk here. I think we can help the adult fans of Lego to construct an identity that will help make America great again. It could help return freedom and popular rule to places all over the world. These are double-edged swords here, so far as weapons are concerned. They can cut against us, but we can also reappropriate them for our use, for pro-human uses. I'll leave that for later. In the literature that I'm reading, not necessarily in the case of Lego, but I'm reading a lot of literature in the humanities or the post-humanities, or what I call the inhumanities, the people who are in literary theory, so-called, the lit crit crowd, who started getting massive amounts of funding from intelligence agencies and private and publicly funded foundations to destroy any semblance of objective truths or universal values. And this was all part of the project to devalue humanity itself, to devalue human life, right? Abortion. All these are interlocking attempts to devalue human life. And we've seen here any number of people talking about, and I won't go into their names. One of them is Donna Haraway, by the way. I don't want to give them any publicity. They're gods and goddesses in academia, but she started writing on a 20, maybe even 30 years ago about cyborgs and these hybrids between man and machine, human and animal. But underlying all this is the notion that human beings themselves, ourselves, we are an invasive species, right? We are and there's a Japanese-Canadian ecologist by the name of David Suzuki. He might have passed away recently, I don't know. But he referred constantly as an ecologist, as a green type of fascist. He constantly referred to human beings as being an invasive species. He likened us to worms, right? And this was an ecologist. This is a person who's supposed to be pro-nature, right? Of course, where I'm going with that is that particular strain of thought has also been hijacked. It might have started out well, but people like the Canadian author, the Commonwealth of Canada, which is a British arm, right? Margaret Atwood considers herself an eco-feminist, an ecological green feminist. I've been reading her fiction. She did Handmaid's Tale. It's been made into Netflix types presentations. And not coincidentally, she has a brother that she's very proud of, who's at least in her mind. I haven't been able to find a lot of articles by him. I've researched him, but he's a top neuroscientist. And by the way, speaking of pop figures who have siblings who are architects of the New World Order, I found out about a year ago that our own Borat, remember him? Sacha Baron Cohen, Borat's brother is an ethicist. He's a neuroscientist himself. And their jobs are to, again, like the Lego people, trying to convince the artists and intellectuals that this is the pathway to the future. But first of all, we have to tamp down what remains of human creativity, originality, and individuality. We're an invasive species in their mind. By the way, this is something that a chemical engineer out there who's watching, I have a question for you. This is a cooperative, interactive lesson here. What I'm asking you, what is the chemical composition of ABS plastic? What are its components? Where did it come from? It has a history, just like we had Bakelite. prior to plastic? What is its nature and what's its purpose? I know it's petroleum based, and I know that the Rockefeller are petroleum people. Is it toxic? Who developed it? I want to find the history behind that. That's as far as I got in the documentary. Let me just share with you a couple of other articles that I have come up with. Some of you may be familiar with Second Life. It's much more than a video game, but I'll just use that for the sake of convenience. But it's an online game. It's a creation of a virtual social world, and it's produced by Linden Labs, which is based in San Francisco, California. And you can probably see some crossover between what Second Life has been doing for the online community by creating a virtual social world and what Lego is doing in RL, as they call it, real life, not Second Life, but in dimensional form, three-dimensional form. So there's something there for both the people who are in RL and SL. So there's some intersection there of the virtual world of Second Life and Lego that I think that warrants further explanation or investigation. Let me check. Let's see here. I'm going to look at the live chat here, what some of the comments are. Earth 2. Okay, Boomer Doomer, are you a gamer? Because we need a serious discussion, and this is outside of my bailiwick, I'm afraid. I grew up with Pong. I think that's as far as I got. BioShock, is that another video game? Comment? Second Life, Linden Labs. It's ABS, B as in boy. Okay, if you have some teenagers or children at home, this is a good way to engage them in doing some research on their own oppression. Let me see here. Okay. Let me get into my file here, my file folder. Okay, I came up with this concept, and again, it's not something that I just sit around and dream up. I look at literature, mostly academic specialized literature, to generate ideas and concepts, hypotheses, and I come up with a concept calling, and you're hearing it here first publicly. Only my journal knows this, but I'm calling it the gamification of fascism. Gamification is the key term. Gamification of techno-fascism. Where did I draw that analogy? Because the people who are creating it definitely do not believe that they are creating anything close to authoritarian or totalitarian. They think they're creating a better world. And as we've seen time and time again, cultists always think that they're creating a better world or entering a better world. Where did I get it? I found a program, and this is an international phenomenon, ladies and gentlemen. The United States is no longer a leader in these types of, or neither is Britain alone in creating these incredible oppressive technostructures of control. Well, there was a conference held in October 2012 in Tampere, Finland. I don't know where that. I know where Finland is. I don't know where Tampere is or Tampere. It's called Mind Trek, and there's apparently it's been going on for 16 years. It's the 16th International Academic Mind Trek Conference, and the theme of the 2012 conference was Envision Future Media Environments. And there's hundreds of, well, I don't want to say hundreds, let's say scores of papers by academics, researchers, perhaps corporate managerial types to seeing where they can make a buck at it, but definitely very serious thinkers on these topics. But the very first part of this 16th International Academic Mind Trek conference in 2020 was devoted to, guess what? Gamification and analysis. So they have such papers as Defining Gamification, a Service Marketing Perspective. Another paper titled Soviet and American Precursors to the Gamification of Work, right? Because work is being revisioned now. It's being re-engineered. We're being told that we're moving into a post-work economy. And of course, this is why the idea of a universal income is being bruited about for us, because they're trying to get us used to the idea that work as we know it will cease to exist. Technology trees and digital gaming. My gosh, it goes on and on. Lest you think that it's just the Western European world, including Japan and China, which is very much in the ballpark here, I will point you to an article that was published in the journal titled, and this is for real, there are tons of journals out there that most people have never heard about. This journal is called Terrorism and Political Violence. It's a fairly recent article published in 2018. And it's a research note by Ahmed Al-Rawi. And the title is called Video Games, Terrorism, and ISIS's Jihad 3.0. So following the lead pioneered by, I would say, would be Linden Lab's Second Life, people all over the world, for purposes good and bad, are moving into this whole gamification now of terrorism. And I'm suspecting, and I have no proof at this point, again, I go off hunches at first, and then I follow it up with empirical evidence, right? The creative part comes with the hunch, and the ideas, and the perspiration part comes in with trying to validate your argument and see if it holds any water, so to speak. But I'm suspecting also that a lot of these video games are used as back channel means of communication amongst spy networks. I know George Webb, our friend and our champion, oftentimes talks about BlackBerries. And he was talking about them literally, speaking of them more figuratively as of late, which I'm picking up on. I'm thinking that one of the reasons why this Amjad Awan was playing video games in the halls of Congress for hours on end, it seems, is that they weren't playing video games. They were communicating via these video games. I haven't run that idea past George yet, and I think I will see what he has to think about. He's pretty open about these new ideas that come in from different directions. So that's one insight that has to be explored. I'm drawing towards the 45-minute mark here. Let me project outside of the bounds of the documentary, the Lego documentary. We're used to seeing these ABS Lego bricks. I'm projecting beyond the horizon a fusion of these inanimate objects with what's called a biohybrid system. That is, you will see organic matter beginning to fuse with inorganic matter, the ABS plastic. And you will see these figures, these minifigs that have these sort of claw-like hands at this point. They're going to be taking on more human-like or humanoid characteristics. Again, this is the incremental fusion of the machine and mankind. And they call this biomimesis, biomimetic and biohybrid systems. That is the title for the first international conference, Living Machines 2012. This is not the product of William Gibson or Professor Hamamoto. These are academic conferences that are taking place outside of our awareness, except in our case here in our live stream. You're given access here right now. You're being brought into this whole new universe that is not being discussed even in the academic world at the highest levels. Not even in MIT do they have such a large scale overview of what is transpiring as we're worrying about the theft of the 2020 election. This is all running in the background as we speak. Again, biomimetic and biohybrid systems held in Barcelona, España, in July of 2020, Living Machines, first international conference. And I assume they've been having an annual conference ever since then. So this is very much part of what I'm seeing coming down the pike for Lego. Let me end by making appeals to the AFOLs, the adult fans of Lego. I see you as very creative, highly intelligent, even high IQ individuals who are looking for a meaningful place in the society of the present and into the future. And I urge you to take that creative energy and that creativity and to invest it into civil society, especially into our political realm, right? So as we move into the inauguration point of January 20, adult fans of Lego, I would like to see you visit your local state capital, your municipal city fathers and mothers, or if you're in the area, go to the Washington, D.C. Capitol, and to express your political being. Plato called it the zoon politikon, the human being. One of the primary understandings of classical Greek philosophy that was human beings was a zoon politikon, a political animal. Lego and the people behind them, the controllers, the social engineers, the MIT people, and I'm just saying MIT is a stand-in for Yale and University of California and University of Illinois and all these other institutions that are researching these issues. These institutions have turned humanity from the zoon politikon into what Johann Huizinga, who was an intellectual of the 1940s, I think the essay came out in 48, the book was published, I think it's still in print throughout the 1950s. He defined human beings as not zoon politikon, but homo ludens. That is the playing human. He, in the post-war period, was defining human beings as no longer being political actors, no longer being socially engaged, but just involved in gameplay, whether it's Second Life or Lego or everything else in between. I'm weak on video games, and I think it requires, I know it requires a great deal of study starting from the children of this generation, the millennial and the post-millennials who grew up with it. So that is your charge for the future, for the present, and for the future adult fans of Lego. For the rest of us, let's take a deeper look in those little annoying Lego bricks that we step on in the dark and say, oh my gosh, these cheap plastic toys are very annoying. They're very real in ways that hopefully you're getting a sort of an introduction to this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, before I go, let me just take a quick gander at the live chat. See, General Jones either owned or managed Call of Duty. Wow, that's really interesting. I know there's these single shooter games, right? That are quite interesting. And it's not Wayne Huizinga, it's Johan, Johan. I think he was Dutch by nationality. Big Fire by Carlsbad. That's really odd because it's pretty cold right now here in California. Corky Goss loves Huizinga. Yeah, he turned us into the playthings. He's turned us into Play-Doh. Remember when we used to play with Play-Doh? Now we're the ones being played. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a Merry Christmas. I think I might come back on tomorrow or the next day while you're having your feast. I'll be having one of my Hungry Man TV dinners. But I might come back and I'd like to talk a little bit about C.S. Lewis, a very important writer. Most of you know who he is, because I think the antidote or the complement, because I don't want to eliminate Lego. I think it's a really important aspect of culture, especially youth culture and adult culture. But as a complement to this redefinition of humanity as a plaything of the globalists, I want to encourage the reinvestment of our literary heritage and the imagination storytelling via people like C.S. Lewis and his dear friend J.R.R. Tolkien. With that positive note, Merry Christmas. Have a Happy New Year. America and the world will be free once more quite soon. Thank you very much. Good night.